Oh, hello, Studio 108 community. I'm so happy that you clicked in to join us. I'm sitting here with Leah Cordy, and she is someone that I really don't even know. But when I met her, I got all those good vibes, and I said, we have to talk about what you're doing. Leah came to me via introduction from Sierra Coons, who is our strength coach here. And she attended the Galentines with her passion project, Hope's Landing. And wow, I got so many comments, Leah. Like, first of all, the candle that I bought is amazing. But like, I got so many comments from the women who were really thrilled to have met you, to have heard your story. Like, it wasn't just that you provided a really great product, and you did, but that you brought forward this conversation that was really impactful for people. And yeah, do you see what I mean? It's good, good. So I wanted to sit with Leah, and we're gonna dig in together and find out, like, who is this little girl? Cutie little girl. I know, right? Okay. So Leah, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm from the Cleveland area. I grew up on the west side in a little town called LaGrange. There's probably more cows than people there. And then I went to college at Heidelberg University in Tiffin, Ohio, and I studied political science and international studies. And then I stayed an extra year to get my MBA. And when I was taking my MBA classes, I wasn't thinking that I was actually going to use my business degree. I was thinking like, Heidelberg has this program, you can get a discounted and in some cases free MBA if you did your undergrad there. So I'm like, I'm just going to do that. It's a huge benefit, but I don't know that I'm actually going to use this. It's just going to look really good on a resume.
Right. And plus, it's nice. I mean, just like sometimes after high school, people take a gap year.
Yeah.
Like it's nice after college to have like a gap experience.
Like a buffer.
I'm not really ready to launch out. I don't really have that next step. So yeah, that was a good use of time.
Yeah, so I did that for a year, but while I was doing that, I got a job at a steakhouse in Tiffin that was working with survivors of human trafficking and domestic violence. And when I was studying international studies and poli-sci, my main focus was human rights. Like that's why I was interested in that. And so human trafficking, domestic violence obviously correlates very well with human rights. And so having a safe house in Tiffin, which is not a huge place, was really interesting to me.
Right.
And I learned very quickly how prevalent human trafficking is, and also domestic violence.
Startling.
It's terrifying. People have no idea. Toledo is fourth in the entire country for human trafficking. That's not that far away, and certainly not that far away from Tiffin.
No, and also Akron. Akron has a really high rate of human trafficking. Yeah. And I know when I taught down at Yoga Lista and was involved in the community there, through Elevate, we tried to do things to support, but I had friends that were very involved in the human trafficking conversation, and the statistics were startling and concerning. And I think what was so ridiculous to me, and like I said, I had a friend who was like more involved than I was, who would bring me her stories, was how very obvious it is once you know what to look for.
Yeah, and in some cases it is, and even as someone who has been trained in what to look for, and I can, talk about the warning signs all day, but even for someone like me, sometimes it's still so hard to catch.
Gotcha.
Because a lot of times, even if you can identify a woman that's being trafficked, even you know that they're being trafficked, they might not know themselves. Because depending on when they were trafficked, what state they were in when they were trafficked, like there's so many exactly and so many times it starts out with someone pursuing you as a boyfriend or girlfriend, and you start to trust them, and the abuse doesn't actually start until you have really started to trust them, and you're in like the palm of their hand, and then you start falling in love with them, and then suddenly you're being bought and sold all day long, but they have manipulated you so much that you just think that that's normal, or they said, well, you need to do this if you love me, or sometimes it's much more obvious with the threats, like I'm going to kill your family if you don't do this. There's so many different scenarios, but so many people think that human trafficking is just something where you are snatched off the side of the road, and in some cases That is true. And they love to make movies like that because that's more entertaining than this slow burn of people starting to trust their abuser, and then that's actually when it starts. But it's far more likely that it's going to be this slow, long story rather than someone just getting kidnapped.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Tell me, I want to hear the warning signs. I don't want you to let's not go deeper into the story without kind of tapping that for people, because I think it's a really important part of your conversation. So yeah, let's do that.
So one of the hard things about the warning signs is that some of them could be so many different things. So I always tell people, if you see one of these things, don't assume that this person that is being trafficked, but if you start to see 3, 5, 7, then start asking questions. So for instance, if this person gets a new job and they're working really, really late, sometimes they're even spending the night at their place of work. When they come home, they're very antisocial, they don't want to talk about work, or if they do talk about it, it's very vague. When you ask very specific questions, they either don't have answers or they just won't answer. There are more obvious things like bruises, tattoos. There are unfortunately a lot of traffickers that brand their victims, and so there are certain ones for different gangs, diamonds, cherries, but also some people just get those. So it's hard. If your friend shows you their tattoo of a cherry, you don't want to say, oh my gosh, you're being trafficked, because that also could not be the case. Maybe they just like cherries. But those are some common ones. Sometimes the tattoos will be as obvious as property of John Smith, which is so disgusting that someone would ever have that on their body, but sometimes they are branded that obviously property of someone. Fatigue, just so tired all the time, irritable, weight loss. Maybe they have a new group of friends who they won't let you around, who they're staying out really late with, who just seem to be bad influences. So those are a couple of the warning signs, but I always say trust your gut. I know personally my gut has never led me astray pretty much ever in my life.
Do you find sometimes that even if the warning signs to you seem very glaring, that part of the manipulation is that they don't want help, that they push away the people that
absolutely
are kind of like it would be a very sensitive thing to approach someone about something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times
they're at risk.
Yes, exactly. It's pretty much always more appropriate rather than going to that person directly first, unless you're in a case where you're in a truck stop bathroom and this is going to be your only chance to talk to that person. But if it's someone that and you consistently see, it's better to call a hotline. It's better to call someone who's really educated.
Let's put a hotline number in the comments.
There.
Yeah, and then that way that will be available to people.
Yeah, so it's definitely better to call someone who's educated on it and say, okay, what should I do next?
Right.
Because every situation is so different, and the people that are on the other end of these hotlines are really well trained to know exactly who they need to connect with. But yeah, I mean, most of the time,
I think too, it would be naive to assume that this was like an isolated case.
Yeah,
it's more likely part of a bigger scene.
Oh yeah,
that you just wouldn't want to rumple the feathers. Yeah. Unless you were kind of wise to how things were operating and had some power to do something about it. Yeah. I know my friend told me a story where she was in somewhere in the South at a resort, and there were young girls talking to an older gentleman who was showing them pictures, and she said that she maneuvered herself to kind of overhear some of the conversation and was very, very suspicious that he was trying to lure them into a trafficking kind of situation. He was trying to lure them to a particular room to meet his friends and that kind of thing, and they looked like college girls. So she went to the front desk, and the front desk called the police to come in. So even something like that is so much smarter than.
Yeah, and with human trafficking, less than 2% of victims ever get out. So if you see something, say something. Even worst case scenario, it ends up being nothing, but at least you did your part because you recognized a sign, you did something about it, and best case scenario, it's not human trafficking, but at least you know that you alerted somebody and they checked into it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so this means a lot to you, I can tell.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that. Because I think like Leah and I were mentioning that she started her nonprofit Hope's Landing in 2021, which was the same year I opened the studio, and how like it's just there's always a growth trajectory. Small businesses are hard. There's always like what you're working up against, how you're breaking in new, and like it's small business, but you guys, it's like creative stream. Like anytime you're bringing something new creative into three-dimensional form, you're gonna have some rocky roads because you're making something, you know. So like we're special, but we're not special. I'm sure that you're having experiences like that too. But the passion behind what you do is so important because that's the gas in the gas tank, right? And if you run out of that gas, you're not gonna, you know, your business isn't gonna thrive.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we started with that, and we can look back through.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So then tell me how Hope's Landing
came to be.
Yeah.
So when I was working at the safe house, I was there for probably a little over 2 years, and I was noticing this very common occurrence that we would have these women in the safe house for about 6 months to a year, sometimes less, sometimes more. And these women would be doing so well while they were in our safe house. We'd get them counseling. They had a secure place to stay. They had food, you know, everything was given to them, and they would do so well. And I, you know, would just see this growth and be so proud of them. And so then eventually they'd get to a point where they're like, okay, I think I'm ready to leave the safe house. And we would always encourage that because, you know, if you are ready, awesome. That's the point.
Yeah.
So they would kind of go out into the world, but a lot of times they would just end up back in our safe house a couple months later. And after this happened a couple times, I was like, what are we doing wrong? Like part of my job was fundraising and, you know, getting people to support us. And I'm like, what are we doing? How are we using these donor dollars that is clearly not as effective as it needs to be, because these women are just ending back up at square one. And so I talked to
it's not square one. They're ending back at square two.
Yes, true.
But yeah.
And so, but you know, we'd have to start over the addiction counseling and, you know, all of that. And so
yeah, I'm sure addiction really goes hand in hand.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that we have ever employed someone that has not had a history of addiction.
Gotcha.
So basically I talked to these women. I'm like, all right, like, how did you end up back here? Like, help me understand. I'm not judging you, you know, that's not why I'm asking these questions. I'm asking because we're not doing our job well enough.
Yeah.
And so it just became clear that these women really didn't have long-term support. At the shelter that I was at, we didn't have the resources to provide that, which, you know, so many nonprofits only had limited resources. So, you know, we could do the safe housing, we could do that short-term stuff, but we didn't have long-term resources to support them. And that's really what they needed. And so after talking to them, it was just so clear that they needed jobs, but they can't work at a place like Walmart or Dunkin' Donuts. Some of these women have such bad PTSD, they can't even be around men, let alone, you know, hundreds of them a day. And, you know, they have gaps in employment. If you were kidnapped for 7 years, you don't want to have to explain that in a job interview. So many of them have drug charges, which a lot of times are not their fault. One of the biggest ways that a trafficker gets their victim to stay is by getting them addicted to drugs, ensuring that they can't get them anywhere else. And then they're not going to leave. They don't need to chain you to a pole. You're not going anywhere. So there were just so many reasons why these women couldn't get jobs or keep jobs. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just find them jobs. And then it became very clear that
well, no problem.
Yeah, like we'll just like figure it out.
Where's the labor?
So that didn't really work out because, like I said, they can't work at, you know, the places that
those entry level. Yeah, even like Starbucks, it's such an overstimulating environment, and it's really hard to respect and appreciate what people have gone through.
Yeah,
like what employable means.
Yes.
And like mental health is like everything.
Yeah.
And with so much compassion for that expectation, just go get a job. That's not really.
It became very clear that that was not an option. Like there was a lot more to it. So I was like, okay, I need to find a trauma-informed environment for them. And then it became clear very quickly that that just didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's not fair. these women have been through the worst things on earth. And yeah, we have these short-term resources, but why is there not further stepping stones? Why is there not a sustainable path forward for them? We can't expect them.
Yeah, you opened a business, but even like other business partners, like what would be a trauma sensitive work environment?
Yeah.
That's a really $1 million question right there.
Yeah, and in a place like Tiffin, unless you're working with a place like Survivors, that isn't crossing your mind.
Absolutely not.
You're working with staff that, this is probably their second, third, fourth job. They kind of know how it works. You're not even considering that someone might need a trauma-informed environment.
Yeah.
And so eventually survivors might be able to work in a place like that, but their first job after leaving a safe house, they can't work somewhere like that.
Yeah.
And so, since it didn't exist, I was like, I'll just create it myself, I guess.
So, done with the MBA check.
Yeah.
Next, create a work environment.
Yeah.
Suitable for people who haven't had traumatic experiences, and you needed a product.
Yep. Yeah. So I looked around my room, and also I wasn't done with my MBA. I was in the middle of the MBA, and I was going through a breakup, and I had just gotten a puppy, and I was working full time at the safe house. So sometimes you just have to do things, and the timing might not be perfect, but it's never going to be perfect. And I will always stand by that, because this was probably the most inconvenient time in my entire life to start something like this.
It's probably perfect.
Yeah.
It's probably the glue that got you through all of that.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
It did.
Mad respect though, girl, mad
Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was just looking around my room, and I was like, okay, like I have decided now that I'm going to start this thing. What are we gonna sell? What are we gonna do? And I looked around, and I had a ton of candles, and my roommates had a ton of candles, and I was like, okay, well, that's something that you can sell to quite a few different price points. You can sell a $5 candle, you can sell a $30 candle. It's something that's consumable, so you're going to burn it, and then you're going to need another one, and it's something that people love to give as gifts. And I was like, okay, I think that's it. We're gonna do candles, and it's also easy to teach and easy to learn. So we started doing candles, but we also kind of right out of the gate also started with some bath and body products, like lotion, lip balm, body butter, sugar scrubs.
You guys, she does a really good job on Instagram, and she did this little post of her like whipping up her body butter with her little KitchenAid whipper thing, and I was like, oh, I want some. Is that icing?
I know. Our social media manager, Megan, she came in the one day, and she was like, that is so beautiful. Like, we have to have a video of this, because it literally looks like you want to eat it. We do not recommend. but yeah, so we started with a bunch of different products. We've changed them a bit over the last couple of years, but yeah, we wanted things that were easy to teach, easy to learn.
So you had to find a location to manufacture, make this, ways like staff to like organize the employment of these people, the supervision. And all of this is happening in Tiffin, but you moved back to Cleveland.
So I didn't move back to Cleveland until Hope's Landing was about a year old.
Gotcha.
So I was still in Tiffin for all of this. So our first production space was actually the Safe House garage. Any good company starts in a garage. So yeah, I mean, it was March, April when our first products were being made. And we could handle the temperature out there, and candles were fine out there and through the summer. But as it was getting colder, I was like, we gotta find somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so I did a presentation at the Rotary Club in Tiffin, and someone asked, what are you gonna do when it gets cold? And I was like, that's a great question. We are trying to figure that out ourselves. Yeah. And so he was a pastor at a church, and he said, we've got this big space, you can have it. We have this kitchen, and we're not really using it, and we would love for it to do some good. And so they let us stay there for about a year, and then we actually outgrew that place. And so now we're in the basement of another church in Tiffin, but they have given us an office, storage, our production space, that we could not be where we are now without the community just embracing us with open arms.
Wow. Oh, wow. We just need to take a deep breath around that. That's really, really beautiful. That's really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations for just being so well aligned to bring that through and to organize that.
Yeah, we've been very, very lucky.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's one of those things where you can just feel that it's so meant to be, because every barrier that we face, something comes and knocks it down.
Yeah.
And I have really had a lot of faith that this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and this is going to continue to help women, because there have been so many things that could have gotten in the way and just, destroyed us. Lack of funding, lack of this, lack of that. Yeah. And every time a door opens. Yeah. And you just have to believe that that door is going to open, because it always does.
Yeah, we were talking about being an Aquarian versus Piscean, and Leah's an Aquarian, and I was like, oh, well, so then you live in this space where, when you're in good alignment, life flows and the solutions are there, and you're here to bring in innovative ideas and innovative ways of working, innovative ways of serving. Yeah. So, that's just really... kudos to you.
Thanks.
Yay.
And the typical nonprofit model is not outdated, but it's gotten so much more difficult after COVID. People aren't going to in-person events as much. It's much harder to do that traditional fundraising. And as someone who worked in that space, that's really, really stressful.
Yeah.
And so if we can have a nonprofit where we're employing people, we're giving them jobs, and giving them a trauma-informed environment, we're making a beautiful product and we're selling it, then let's do that.
Right, there's a wheel that's churning.
Yeah.
I want to hear a couple things. First of all, you told me that your candles and your care products are in over 100 stores.
Yeah.
And you only named 3 in Cleveland. What's going on?
So we sell all over the US to different stores, and we do have our products in a couple different countries as well. So we don't want to have too many stores in one spot, because it creates competition, and we don't want competition with our products. Right. However, we're always looking for more stores in Cleveland. I know I named 3, but occasionally...
Let's name them real quick.
Yeah. We've got the Cuyahoga Collective in Lakewood. We've got Bella Moxie in Medina, and then One World Shop. They've pretty much been with us from the beginning in Rocky River. They're a fair trade store. So yeah.
3 really sweet spots to go in no matter what. But you'll find Hope's Landing there. Awesome.
Yeah, and you can also ship anywhere in the U.S.
You've got a website.
Yes.
So everything off the website can be purchased there and shipped too. Okay, so then tell me kind of where the funds funnel. So I'm really impressed by just how much service is embedded in your business. But then the next step would be you actually solved for what you were looking for in terms of finding a next step placement for women. And then what happens, the funds go back to support the house? Do the funds continue forward with people to other opportunities?
Yeah, so now we were our own individual organization. So before we were kind of partnered with the Safe House. Now, as we've grown so much, we're kind of our own organization, and then we just partner with different safe houses. So we hire from shelters, safe houses, programs in the area. We usually hire someone when they're about ready to graduate from a program. So that way it's not like they graduate and then they have a new job and it's so much change at once. It's okay, you know that you're getting ready to take the next step, but while you still have that constant of the housing and, that relationship that you've had for a while, come work with us. And then eventually, you'll take the next step to be on your own.
So there's a lot going on for people.
Yeah.
Part of that transition.
So pretty much someone comes to work for us, usually 6 months to a year. Sometimes less, sometimes more. Every case is so different.
How many women are you employing at the same time right now?
Usually 4 survivors, 3 to 4 survivors. During the Christmas season when we're super, super busy, it might be 5. But we keep a small staff for a couple reasons. For
trauma informed.
Yes, trauma informed. We don't want to overwhelm anyone. It can be a lot when someone new comes in, especially a trauma survivor. But also, just funding, space. So it actually kind of works out that we have a small staff, because we're able to really have good relationships with each of them.
Yeah, no, there's intelligence there.
Yep.
And they're going to get the care they need.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so 100% of the profit from any sales goes right back into the organization. So it's used to obviously pay our staff. We pay a little bit of rent at the church that we're at, but they've been so generous to us to barely make us pay anything. And then obviously the raw materials to make the products, but not a single dollar goes outside of Hope's Landing.
Yeah, yeah. Good girl. So that's why you got that MBA.
Yeah, it kind of worked out.
I love it. I love it so much. So what kind of, like I saw your mom here. What kind of support?
Oh, that's not my mom.
Oh, that wasn't your mom? I just assumed it was. I thought, well, because you know my daughter and I were in the studio, so I'm just kind of like in my eccentric. Everyone's just like, yeah.
That was she's now a volunteer, but she was our director of operations.
Excellent. I bet she'd take you in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I love Iris. I do refer to her as my mom sometimes, but yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah, so you have a lot of supportive staff.
Yes.
And they're running the show in Tiffin from down there for you.
Yeah, it was a big step last year. On March 10th, I hired an executive director, Marissa. I was CEO and executive director up until that point, so both running the nonprofit side and the business side, and also having another full-time job to pay my bills. And that just became too much, and I wanted to tell myself so badly that you can handle it, you know, like there's enough hours in the day. And until I realized what that was doing for the sake of the survivors, that's when I was like, okay, no, I need to hand this off to someone.
Yeah.
And so
you're probably working pretty much every bit as much. Because especially when you're in that growth trajectory, it's just like the new growth just kind of like fills in those places.
Yeah.
So my guess is you're not bored.
I'm not. No, never. It's funny because people that know that I stepped back from the nonprofit side, they're always like, okay, but I thought that you stepped back, so like, you know, shouldn't you have less work? And I'm like, yes, but we're growing. So like actually I'm like busier than ever.
Right.
But yeah, so
I don't know, is there a next step within that for you?
Well, so once I hired Marissa, she really took over like that side of it, and we were able to just grow our, you know, community education, our survivor programming, all of that. And then I just focused on growing the brand and the brand awareness, getting our products into more stores, and we're both doing a pretty good job of our side of things.
Yeah, it's moving forward.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Can we do anything to support you here?
I mean, just telling people about us. I feel like once people know about us, they remember us. Because there are some larger companies like ours, like Thistle Farms is a pretty well-known like national program, but this one's so local. And so I think just telling people like, hey, there's something here that is supporting survivors, and you're probably going to buy candles anyway. You're going to buy chapstick anyway. Buy it from here. And so just letting people know about us.
How did you find the name Hope's Landing?
So I had a very long list of things that I was considering naming them, and sometimes I look at that list and I'm like, wow, I'm really happy that I picked Hope's Landing. But my concept behind it was these women come from all over. You know, some of them have been trafficked in California or Las Vegas or even in other countries, but they all kind of land here. And there's a reason why they land here, and it's to find hope. And so Hope's Landing was just kind of born from that idea.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. You kind of landed there too.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. And I mean, all of the things that I said I was doing at once, I do feel like Hope's Landing happened at exactly the right time for me. Both, it was healing for me, it was a growth period for me, and I'm so proud of what we've been able to accomplish so far.
I'm so proud of you. That's really beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. So I'm going to put the names of the stores below. I'll put the hotline below, your website. You guys, isn't she just darling? Tell me anything. And you know, the candles in my bathroom. What did I get? The one with cedar?
Oh, cedar, lemon, vanilla.
Yes.
It smells like a good smelling man.
Maybe that's why I like it. Yeah, it's just it's not real sweet smelling, so I liked it.
Yeah. Yep, we've got something for everyone.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, click below, you guys. Follow along and support the best you can. And thank you. Thank you. Namaste.